So, we have been doing this series for this is the fourth week now. In the first week, we did I am special, safe, and accepted. And then we did I am a new creation. And last week, we did I can trust Father God. This week, we're going to look at I can choose to see things as God says they really are. I can choose to see things as God says they really are. One of my favorite stories in the Bible is the story of Noah and the ark. So Noah was really old, and in that time, everybody in the world was just living their own life and pretending or ignoring God. They were doing their own thing, disobeying God, and God was not happy. Only Noah and his family followed God. So God said to Noah, if you guys remember, you should build an ark and I will destroy the world with the flood. So Noah spent 120 years building this massive boat. It was so big that no other boat has ever been built that is that big, the ark. And everyone must have been laughing at Noah because, first of all, it had never rained in those days. So what was he going to do with the boat? And it took him 120 years to build this massive thing. God had given that time so that Noah could manage to build that massive boat because it was so huge to fit all the animals in, but also to give people an opportunity to turn away from their wrongdoings and turn to God. But they didn't, they just kept laughing at Noah. I'm sure that in those 120 years, when Noah was building that ark, that there were times maybe that Noah maybe it just seemed like, oh, maybe what I'm doing is crazy or whatever, or it doesn't make sense because it's never rained, and this is going on for a long time. But he chose to see things the way God sees them. So I'm going to show you guys something.
Okay, now if you look really closely at this picture, can you see Jesus? Can you see the word Jesus? Focus on the white letters. I know there's a lot of things happening, but just focus on the white letters. Okay, how about this one? It's different colors, but again, can you see the name Jesus? If you focus on the black letters, there's a lot going on, but just keep your focus on Jesus.
So, guys, as you saw with the optical illusion, it's important for us to keep our eyes on Jesus, as Noah did for those 120 years building that ark. Keep your focus on Jesus, no matter what is happening around you, no matter what the enemy tells you. Just keep your focus, keep your eyes on Jesus. So last week, we stopped before we found out whether Sophie and Thomas are going to be wolf food. So let's find out what happened. Thomas was very afraid, Sophie more so. It was well past midnight, the storm was relentless, the rain hammered down. They were cold, soaked through to the skin, huddled together, their backs pressed against a cold gravestone. And as if it wasn't enough, they were about to be eaten by a wolf thing. Then it occurred to Sophie, the strangest thought. She had no idea why it landed in her mind, but it was there, and she had nothing to lose. And he had fixed her leg, so why not? With a quivering voice, she spoke, I belong to Jesus. Go away. The wolf creature looked as if he had been punched. It took a step back, and then it stared. It looked from side to side, trying to work out what had happened. Sophie was beginning to understand who she was, who God created her to be, a child of God. And this was not time for doubt. Jesus was real, and he loved her, and he loved Thomas. And that's what Mr. Dandita had said. So he might just be interested in keeping them safe. And what did she have to lose? So again, with a new boldness, I belong to Jesus. Go away. This time the wolf creature almost toppled, and now she stood up. I belong to Jesus. Go away. There was a huge flash, and the wolf thing crumbled and was gone. Thomas stood in silence and walked to the mess that in the ground that used to be the wolf creature. Then he looked at Sophie. Then he looked back at the mess. And then he looked back at Sophie. And then he said, wow, Soph, that was very, very cool. Sophie stood there trembling. It worked, Thomas. I can't believe it worked. I remembered what Mr. Dandita had said. I remembered I was created by God and spoke out the truth that I belonged to Him, and it worked. The bad thing went away. Did you see that, Thomas? Did you? Well, he had. He nodded, but his eyes were wide. And then he asked the question that Sophie did not want to hear. Soph, do you think you can do that again? Sophie shrugged. I guess. Why? Thomas simply pointed. The whole graveyard was moving. There were wolf things coming to life, walking towards them from every corner. Oh, was all Sophie could manage. And then she stammered, I can't do it. Not by myself, I'm afraid. I think we're in big trouble, Thomas. And more wolf things advanced towards them. Now they were surrounded. There must have been at least 20 of them. The rain kept falling. All Sophie wanted was to go home, get warm, and not get eaten by the wolf things. Surely this wasn't too much to ask. Thomas was holding her hand. Normally, that would be the worst thing she could possibly imagine. But facing a pack of wolf things did make worrying about holding hands seem slightly silly. What was she to do? She searched her mind for ideas. Thomas was also thinking, maybe the key. Maybe the key was a magic key. He lifted it up above his head and waved it at the wolf things. He wasn't sure it was possible, but it certainly seemed. They were laughing at him. Great, Thomas thought. Laugh at us and then eat us. Not my best day ever. It needs to be you as well, Thomas, said a whisper from behind. It needs to be you as well. Speak out the truth of who you are. You can do it, Thomas. Thomas looked for the whisper. He looked behind the gravestone. No, it couldn't be. She wore a hooded top. The string was pulled tight. She was very wet, but it was her face. She whispered again, you can do it. His mind was racing. He was much happier when Sophie was doing amazing things. What was he supposed to do? He looked at her and shrugged. He figured there was no point in all this talk of God if God didn't do stuff. Thomas, what are you doing? Whispered Sophie. Nothing but alarm in her voice. We can do this together. These are enemies of God, so we need to speak out truth. And Sophie agreed that and did as Thomas asked her, and together with slightly quivering voices they said, as confidently as they could, we belong to Jesus. Go away. The wolf things just stood there and laughed. Again, Soph, but this time, let's remember, God is with us, and that's true even if it doesn't feel true. So they declared again, but this time, believing the truth, that they belonged to God and He was really with them. We are children of God, so go away and leave us alone. The wolf creatures didn't laugh this time. Instead, they took a step backwards and exploded, leaving nothing to show that they were ever there. Sophie sat, shook her head. What is going on here? I have been into the graveyard again and again and never seen anything like this. But you weren't taking the key then, were you? Replied Thomas. And of course he was right. That was the only difference. Thomas held out his hand and helped Sophie up. With shoes scratching and slouching, clothes dripping, they stumbled towards the gate. Then they were out. A late-night truck drove past. Everything looked so normal, but Sophie and Thomas knew better. The world wasn't how they thought it was. There was God and there were angels, but also there were bad things too. They walked in silence for a few minutes. The sun was trying to rise, but it wasn't going to make a dent in a night as wet and this wet and cold. Eventually, Sophie broke the silence. Thomas, how did you do that? How did you know what to do? Thomas looked at the floor as he walked. He wasn't all sure how to explain what had happened, but he did his best. Someone told me, Sophie, someone appeared behind the grave and told me that we needed to remember the truth that we belong to Jesus. But Sophie knew that Thomas was leaving something out. She had known him long enough to know when he was hiding something. Thomas, what aren't you telling me? Thomas continued to look at his shoes as he squashed and sloshed along. Just then, he became aware of something heavy in his pocket. He reached in and pulled out the key and handed it to Sophie. She took it with a nod, but he needed to tell her. Soph, the person who spoke to me from behind the grave, it was you. What? Sophie responded, puzzlement in her voice. What? But I was next to you, Thomas. The famous Thomas shrugged, but he saw what he saw. She looked exactly like you, Soph. Exactly you. Same nose, same eyes, same lips. Sophie was a little worried that Thomas seemed to remember her in such detail, but she put that aside as she tried to get her head around what he'd actually said. Well, she couldn't have been me, could she? Unless I time traveled, and there's no such thing as time travel. So how? They were nearly home. Hopefully nobody was up yet. They had time to sneak in, dump their wet clothes and sleep. At least Sophie would try to sleep. She needed to sleep. The key would have to wait. And as would solving the mystery of the second Sophie in the graveyard. What a night. What's in the box and who is the second Sophie? And why does Thomas remember Sophie's face so well? All will be revealed soon.